Um, Thanks for the introduction. A little added bonus to this presentation, I didn't realize it when we talked about this, but the ED director and some of his team are actually in attendance. So not only will you be able to see this presentation, but any questions related to the actual operations, performance, and numbers, they're directly accessible at the very back, and they wouldn't mind at all answering questions. The emergency department that we're going to showcase first, it's in Springfield, Missouri. It's fairly unique. It's certainly unique across any of the ones that we've ever worked on before because we were actually able to incorporate every single bell and whistle that you can imagine under one roof. We haven't been able to do that. We weren't able to do that prior, and we haven't been able to do it since, so it really stands out from that standpoint. They're a level 1 trauma center. And this year they'll be seeing about 72,000 patients, and what we've designed is capacity for the next 10 years in one fell swoop, so they won't have to go back in the near future. What I want to go through is the design concepts that led to the arrangement and planning of the overall facility. We start with the exam room, and like we talked about, like you've heard before, the flexibility of a universal exam space. This particular module that is at the core, 62 rooms is what they have within the facility. We same-sized and standardized every single room. So you walk into one room, a typical exam room, you can't tell the difference from one end of the department to the other. It has all the same amenities, the sink is in the exact same place, the doors are the same, the gases are the same, everything. The size and the configuration of the room are exactly 150 square feet. The size, depth, orientation, all of that's important. One, it allows for an actual 9-foot sliding glass door that gives you a total clear dimension of 50 inches, which is extremely important, plus it breaks out. But every room has a sink, a 32-inch flat screen TV, a case cart per room, the document station in every one of the rooms, and then a family area. And then we take that same concept of standardization along the room and we incorporate it into a pod that is standardized. So each one of these pods are made up, in this particular case, of 12 rooms, or the initial intent was a 12-room pod. They're arranged identically, and then they have support space at each one of the corners. So your clean linen, your soiled utility, your nourishment, all of those areas are decentralized within each individual pod. And the pod itself then becomes a self-sustained mini emergency department. And then the number of pods are relative to the volume and the acuity also that the facility sees. The core of the pod is what we call our bullpen, and that's what Sherry alluded to earlier. So this is our team care area. In this particular configuration, we had assumed that we would have a patient care team made up of 1 doctor, 3 nurses, tech, and a unit secretary. The ability to flex in and out with mid-levels is there as well, because the number of rooms is based on the physician and the mid-level component and what they can tree and seat. When you take those individual pods then, what we do is we arrange them along a central spine. And so the pods themselves are flipped about a central corridor, and that in turn turns them into racetracks. And when you talk about a breathing emergency department, this is one of the physical manifestations of that. So during the day when you're the busiest, you have all 5 pods up and operating. As your volumes start to decrease later on in the night, then you turn them off, you turn them down, and at the end of the day, I think right now they're running 2 pods 24 hours a day. And so they have the flexibility to operate these pods based on census and patient arrival. And then one of the other unique features about this particular emergency department is each one of these pods, operating as its own independent emergency department within, but linked by this central spine, has clear story elements within the pod area. And what I mean by that is, and you'll see in the pictures, is we have elevated the ceilings up to 17 feet, and we have glass clear stories wrapped all around. So there's natural daylight into not only every staff space, but every care space. And then another thing that we did was we took all of the non-clinical components out of the facility. So IT closets, electrical closets, anything that was not core to patient care, and we put them up on the roof in a self-contained spine, and we call that the mechanical spine. What it does is it maximizes the efficiency of the space, so you got only core space, necessary for patient treatment on the ground floor. It also separates that maintenance traffic, so you don't have maintenance people coming in and working in the patient care area. They can access everything they need up in that space, never having to cross traffic. And so when you get a diagram just of the facility, we have, just this, what we call the integrated spine, and that takes you across all the pods, back to imaging, back to the main hospital, and then we separate that clinical spine with a public spine, and that's for the main traffic outside of the ED, takes you back and forth to the hospital as well. Our ambulance traffic arrives on the complete opposite end from our walk-in traffic. We keep those completely separated, and then they just tie back and forth down that center. And this is just a shot of, so you have your drop-off traffic that is more like an airport that can accommodate anything. I think we can accommodate up to 10 vehicles if necessary, undercovered, adjacent to the main walk-in. You have your public corridor, which is a well-appointed public corridor that gets you back and forth to the hospital without having to have cross-traffic through the emergency department. And then your main spine, you can see visually the three on your right-hand side of the screen. You can see the three individual racetracks. And one of the things that we did in this project was we color-coded every one of the pods. So instead of people having to remember what number pod they're in or family visitors and things, everybody remembers colors. And so the wayfinding was enhanced with this as well. Now, all of it put together, and once again, one of the unique things is just packing everything under one roof. We relocated the entire emergency department from the north side of the existing hospital to the south. So when we did that, we brought imaging, we brought everything that we wanted. So within the emergency department itself, it has an embedded imaging center. It has a 26 fully private bed OBS unit. And then it also has the main administrative component for the ED. So trauma, ED, their offices are right off of one of the pods. The waiting room, when you first come in, you'll see a waiting room that is completely open. You'll see visibility to the triage rooms. One of the unique features of the waiting room is they actually went with 3 triage rooms in this particular model, and what we did was we put them right outside of the waiting room, and they're sliding glass, 4-foot wide glass doors, but they have hypergraphics on them, 1, 2, and 3, to designate the rooms. And they also have a 3M perforated coating that allows the nurses in the triage room to be able to see out into the waiting room and monitor it, but no one can see into the triage room. But you can't tell it. It's not like mirrored glass like you typically see, or the blinds that you always have trouble with. The other thing adjacent to the waiting room that's nice is there's a healing guarding that the patients actually have access to, family members, people that are waiting, that they can use while they're there waiting. They can go outside, but it's completely enclosed. It's not like they can wander off, or people can come in from a different area. And let's see, in this particular side, one of the things that we were able to do that we really liked is we wanted to have a minor care area that we could street and treat, take care of the 4s and 5s, keep them vertical. And so the initial design had 4 recliners just off of the triage. And then across from that, it had a sub-waiting or a results waiting area. As things happened through design, we ended up losing 2 of the recliners for a discharge consult area. And one of the things that I think is very beneficial is the lessons learned to go through some of these things. And I just want to point this out while I get the chance. That discharge consulting area, just like in every one of the projects that we've done, I think right now it's probably being used as storage. They would have been a lot better off having those other 2 recliners up there. And so in the future, it'll probably revert back to that. But if anybody tries to talk you into doing a dedicated discharge consulting area so that you can capture that patient as they're trying to make their way out, try and convince them that you can do recliners and actually affect the patient flow much better. This is the waiting room when you walk in. You walk in through a main vestibule. 30 feet in front of that, there is a nurse greeter, or there's a greeter that takes your information. Just directly adjacent to that is the security station that has complete oversight of both the waiting room and of the greeting and of the vestibule and of the drop-off. So if you were able to look at it from behind this, you could see that you can see everything out into what's coming into the emergency department, and know, just like earlier, having a doc in triage, if there was one up here, would be able to walk and assess before they even came in the door. One of the unique features also is we decentralized as much as we could all the support space through this main spine. So we have 2 different sub-waiting areas back into the emergency department itself. So this is for family that they don't have to go back into the waiting area, or it's used for patients as a results waiting area, but they are centralized, or they are decentralized so that they service each one of the racetracks along that main spine. Another unique component is we actually put a chapel that is for the emergency department only, and it sits off of one of the first pods. An area of respite, family, it looks out into the healing garden, and it gets utilized more so than we originally had thought it would. And then, of course, you see the recliners in the minor carrier and what we call a hyper track, or taking care of the 5s and 4s. And then this section through, you can see the ceilings in each one of the pod areas, like I said, are 17 feet, and the clear story glass allows the daylight in. And then from that mechanical spine, on the back side of the pods, that's where we feed all of the air conditioning, everything else for it. And this is what each one of the pods look like. Once again, every one of them are identical except for the color coding. So you see the bullpen or the care team area in there, and we wanted to keep it as collaborative of an environment as possible, but we still wanted to protect the doctors from interruption as much as possible while giving the nurses the opportunity to be on the front line. So the nurse station is without glass, without any type of visual protection, and the physician component of it is on the backside there. It's acoustically separated by glass, but they can still visually have access to the rooms, to the patients. Although what we did do after the fact is we frosted a band of glass so that when they're sitting and they're working, they have the choice as to whether or not they want to make eye contact with the patients or patient families or anything else just by simply looking up over the glass, versus that opportunity where everybody approaches them because they don't have the option to hide behind it. Just directly behind that is the nourishment station that we also combined with their meds. So we don't have doors on it on either side. You can access it, and that has all of your nourishment, your fridge, your Pyxis, your supply cabinets, everything that is for that main pod. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see it up there, but 7, 9, and 6, those are basically the core support areas, and we focus those around the central area, and then those support the pods independently. One of the things that we did change in mid-design on this is the original design was to have the spine separating a 12-room pod and a 12-room pod. Halfway through the design, we actually shifted it. So we turned one pod, or the the west side, into a 9-room configuration, and the other one into a 15-room configuration. The initial thought was 10 rooms is good for a per doc basis. So 9 is no problem. The 15 was going to be too much for an individual doc, but not enough for 2. As they use it right now, they actually have 2 doctors in the 15-room pod, and they float to the others. But the opportunity to introduce a mid-level into that will work out really well in the future, and they can have 1 doc and a mid-level servicing the 15-room pod. Once again, just another shot. This is the amber pod. The 3 pods, we had to color code them with the name, so amber, blue, and green were the 3 different pods that they came up with. And back to one of the comments that Sherry was talking about as far as the zones, they utilize the green pod, for instance, because it's close proximity to walk-in and the minor care as a fast track, if you will, to throw your 3s in most of the time. And then, of course, the trauma pod is its own trauma pod, and then everything else falls in between. And so depending on the volume and the time of the day, they can use these as mix and match since they're universal rooms for the most part, or they can designate a particular pod to take a particular acuity. And then this, another point, the room you're looking at right here, this is one of the things that we did change up as well. In order to make each one of the pods its own independent emergency department, if you will, we incorporated a single, what we called critical care room in the corner of each one. And that basically was a room that wasn't quite the size of a trauma room, what was almost double the size of a regular exam room. And we equipped it so that it could almost be a trauma room. Don't deal with traumas there, but you do take care of, you know, your recesses and intubations and some things that you need a little more space for. And each one of those individual pods has one of those rooms in there. Another one of the things that we dealt with is we were able to stack interstitial toilets in here so that you don't really notice where the toilets are, but if you did a flat ratio, you have a 1-to-4 ratio, one exam room, or one toilet for every exam room, which you don't see a lot of. I know that you guys probably, in most of your emergency departments, would like to have a lot more toilets. These guys actually have 4, if depending on the pod configuration, up to 4 rooms that have private toilets to the room, and then they have another 2 rooms that are shared by the remaining rooms in that pod. The trauma pod that you see here, what we ended up doing is we have 5 actual trauma rooms. We have 3 adjacent to the main ambulance bay, and then across from the spine we have another 2. The main trauma pod, which has the 3, in order to keep the trauma rooms as free and uncluttered as possible and to maximize the space and efficiency, we actually left a cased opening on the back of each one of the trauma rooms, and all 3 of them are serviced by a central supply room. So this is where your bear huggers and all your cabinets are and your crash carts and everything else, and you don't have to dedicate that piece of equipment for each one of these rooms. Instead, they just share that pool in the back, and it really frees up the space in there. And you can see right there, there's one of the trauma rooms, or just a clip of it. And then just on the back wall, you simply walk back there for everything that you need. So your airway cabinets, everything else is back there, and you're able to access that without having to go through doors or anything else. Once again, a section cut of the height and kind of how each one of the pods are laid out. Now, I have to say, I've been doing this for 15 years, and this is the first time that we have ever been able to incorporate a imaging unit of this size. This is a dedicated, embedded imaging suite for the emergency department. Of course, they can justify it because they run all of their night stuff through here too, so they're using it all the time. It's not just for the ED, but it's primarily for the ED, and it's in the emergency department, so they get direct access to it. It's made up of 2 CTs, one of which they just recently replaced. Initially, it was an installation, the 8th installation of Toshiba's 320 slice. They had some issues with it, so now it's gone, but they still have 2 CTs in there, 2 regular rads, 2 ultrasound rooms, 1 magnet, and the shell space for another magnet. You don't see this too often. And once again, it is all of 40 feet from the trauma bay and directly off of the main spine, so that it's as accessible as you could possibly have it. One of the other interesting features of this is the radiologists, you know, trying to get them to read in a timely manner and make sure that they were doing everything that they needed to do. We promised them everything they could possibly have and gave them 2 dedicated rooms, as much room for their couch and everything else that they needed, right adjacent to the trauma pods, right in the imaging suite. And the only thing we asked is that we could have glass doors so we could know when they were not answering the door. So, but they're happy. They actually stay in there. They read. Everybody's happy with it. The other built-out component of this is a staff break room and staff lockers, separate physician lounge across from the main staff locker. But it leads to an outside, you'll see in some other things, but it leads to an outside patio, and it's really nice amenity for the staff that they like. And then there's, you know, just nice, clean, big imaging rooms. Another substantial feature of this is a 26-bed, all-private room CDU that, once again, is as close to the emergency department as you can get. We wrestled initially with this. They have some substantial bedding issues upstream, and so their capacity issues, this is kind of a governor for it. Plus, it was a great opportunity to introduce something like this. In hindsight, if we could, we'd probably reduce the number down to something more manageable of about 20. Manageable in the sense that we packed as many as we could in the space that we had, and as many toilets to take care of that, and the ratio really needs to be increased. I think it's a 1-to-4 ratio in here, but that's the number one complaint that we get is there's not enough toilets for the number of private beds. So in hindsight, we probably would have added more toilets and sacrificed rooms. Another unique component is what we call our education space or command center. Dead in the center, there's a room right there that is mainly an education space for most of the time, but it's tied in the AV system to fire, rescue, police, everything, mass disaster, command center type deal. And they actually got to use it. I think they were not even up a year whenever the tornado in Joplin, Missouri took out the hospital and did all the damage there. They received quite a bit of the wounded from that event. So they got to see it in action and watch it pay dividends. This is an interior shot of the OBS unit, similar to what we did on the main ED, just a smaller version. Each one of the rooms, private, sliding glass doors, has all the amenities for the family, as much space as possible, and everybody, views and circulation and everything are set up quite nicely. They have a lot of helicopter traffic, more helicopter traffic than I've seen at any other organization. We put 2 helipads on top of the emergency department and fed them to an elevator that drops directly down into the emergency or into the trauma pod. And they have another 2 existing helipads that are about 400 yards away that they use for service pads. The same way with the air traffic, they have a lot of ambulance providers out there aside from their competition and their own ambulance service, and so they see a lot of ambulance traffic. We provided them with a completely enclosed, conditioned 6 ambulance bay, high-speed garage door bay, and then John Archer, the director, went one step further, and we created probably the only mass disaster, mass casualty containment garage situation that I'm aware of. We have the regular decon situation where we have multiple shower heads and the rollers. You can push the people through and process them. And then if needed, just like in a gymnasium, you can divide with a tarp, you can pull down and divide the garage in half. And we have hoses that string down and come down, and you can, do mass casualty decontams all the way through there if it was ever necessary. Once again, the staff amenity spaces, the break lounge in the back, the lockers, the outdoor courtyard for them, and the room that you see on the bottom right hand is their command center, their education center, where they do most of their training and everything. This was before they did the full install with the AV. It looks like something out of Hollywood. It's got multiple screens and it's all tied into everything across the state, and they use it quite a bit for a multitude of things. And then from a design standpoint, back to the emergency department is the front door in every way these days. Well, physically, where we put this emergency department was on the south side of the hospital, which is where most of the people come from a traffic standpoint to get to the hospital. So visibility was key. Off of the main highway, you can see the emergency department. So we took the opportunity, we incorporated a garden that was accessible both from the emergency department and from the waiting room, and gave patients and families a place where they could go outside if they wanted to. But as part of that, we needed to screen it off and fence it in and also protect it from the sun. So what we did was we built a 14-foot high, 120 feet long stainless steel fence, and then we CNC'd in 12-foot letters that say emergency. And so literally the signage for the hospital, for the emergency department, is on the facade of the building, which is pretty unique. At night, you can see it from half a mile away, along with the clear store and the lighting, but that designates exactly what it is and where to go. So there's no confusion at all when you approach the campus as to where the emergency department is. And in the essence of time, I'm all done there. I can take questions, anything that you have. Yes, sir.
Is anything different about getting portable x-rays done or digital x-ray imaging
Everything is patient-centric from that standpoint. So we do have the main radiology department there, but they also have, I believe, 2 portables, 3, 5, 5 portables, because one of the things, sorry about this, I have to apologize. There are so many things about this that I take for granted and I forget. So in each one of the pods, you have the corners that are support space, and each one of those support spaces house a portable X-ray machine. And so that mini emergency department pod has access to both ultrasound and X-ray, where you can go in and out of that pod instead of having to take them all the way back to radiology.
Part of my question is whether most ordinary X-rays are being done into the X-ray department, or are they being done chart side, things like ankles, knees, shoulders, or are they still traveling to the X-ray department?
John, yeah, well, I'll tell you what, here you go. Well, he'll use that microphone and he'll give you the direct. The question was how many ankles and things are being done in the room versus going back to the main emergency or main imaging department.
Portables versus going to a room. One thing Sean left out, and I know he covered a lot in a short time, but in the amber pod on the west side, so basically dead center of all 5 of these, he put a radiology radiology room for plain films with fluoro, and we use that for all that little stuff that comes in. And we did that because then if we're getting backlogged like we all do, we can get those X-rays rolling even while they're in the wait time, waiting to get back to a room and have results before when they get seen, make a dispo. And then in the main radiology suite, as you said, there are 2 more rad rooms, and I'd say we do, and that's just due to our radiologist preferences. They take probably 90% to the radiology rooms, and the rest they'll do portable. Chest we'll do portable all day long, but most of the radiologists don't like the quality of the film from a digital. But what we like about digital is, especially in the trauma bays, we put packs in all those rooms, and they'll shoot the digital, and in 60 seconds we have it on packs. Just they fire it right there, and that took us from the dark ages. One thing that, and I don't know how many of you guys in your trauma bays have overhead X-ray. Well, we had that, but the bang for the buck is really not there. You know what I mean? It just sat there all the time, and we'd get good quality images, but it's a waste of money, especially with digital portable machines and the quality that they produce now. So,
yes, Senator.
How much was the total cost, and from breaking the ground, opening the doors, how long did it take to build?
Total cost on the project, well, let's put it in perspective. Now you got the contractor talking. This is, total project is 87,000 square feet. And what you don't see is that included also a tunnel component that tied into service, laundry, everything, because we separated that traffic as well. You're not going to see anything from dietary, any of that stuff coming up. It has its own dedicated elevator, and so it doesn't cross. And then we also did the same thing. For patient traffic, for transports, for back to the bed tower, we literally have an elevator that goes up and a rooftop connector dedicated just for patient traffic, so they don't have to cross through public areas. So when you take all of that into consideration, the total construction cost was $32 million. And that's fees, GCs, everything, that's loaded. Total project cost, imaging equipment, FF&E and everything, was right at $46 million. The budget initially set was $50 million. And so we were able to come in under, but if you want to look at a comparative square foot cost, because I know people try to use that as a measure, it was $335 a square foot, but that's with all of those bells and whistles, with all of those additional components, the roofs, connectors, all of those things.
And how long did it take to build?
We were done in 13 months. And this project, I guess, is not fair because we designed and we built it, so it's a little quicker in that delivery system. So this probably in a traditional format would have taken 15, 16 months.
I had a question over here, Sean.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. What we had before, well, we were jamming 66,000 through a 24-bed ED. And as you guys know, that's busy. That included 17 pissed-off hall beds every day.
Yeah. I was actually a patient in the old ED in a 5-hour hall bed, and I was the guy designing the place. So,
That is true.
Yeah, but no, that was 17,000 square feet, their original ED, with those, if you want to call them rooms, spaces.
And actually now we're 44,000, is that right, for the actual ED proper?
Yeah, for the ED proper, we were able to pack in 62 rooms in 44,000 square feet. Now that's exclusive of the CDU and of, radiology and the other stuff, but yes, sir, in the back.
It's beautiful, and I commend you for your work. There's two key things though that I see missing. One is the gym, and the other is the steam room.
Okay, so
I got threatened with my job if I put a basketball court on the outside patio, so.
they took the hoop off the basketball, honestly.
But seriously, do you have a volume or have a need for mental health, emergency mental health, sequestering rooms, protecting rooms? These all look pretty generic.
What we did, and he didn't,
Yeah,
in
sorry, I
the essence
missed
of
it
time,
too.
he didn't go into detail, but there are two totally psych-safe rooms completely, and we only use them when it's the real nice ones that are, come in on polysubstance that has to include PCP and meth. They go in there, but the rest of the behavioral psych, if they're calm, cool, and collected, we put them in any room.
Yeah, because of the visual access, you can, just like you said, you can put those in the rooms, and then the real bad ones, we did the full-on vestibule, sitter, toilet, seclusion room back there, but we don't see as much use, but the anticipation for the use is absolutely there. So we were just having this discussion yesterday because we're doing one right now, and that's a big contention point. And 5 years from now, absolutely.
We're a little unique of a system because we have a sister hospital that we own as well that has our inpatient psych unit, and so the region EMS guys know to take them to that ED,
Yes.
right? So that's a whole different nightmare in itself.
It's worth the giving up the song.
Yeah. Sir.
Isolation or?
Yeah.
Another unique feature. So every one of these pods, remember the concept is independent emergency department mini pod. So at the end of every pod, so in this diagram, label number 6, there are 2 rooms, and they're the same in every single pod. Those are their isolation rooms with dedicated toilets flanking on either side. So you always know in every pod where your isolation rooms are. And in addition to that, one of the things that John asked to have is the opportunity for a SARS event or something like that to be able to flip that OBS unit with a button, and now you got an entire isolation unit, 26 rooms. And so that is in place.
And we did that, actually was on for about 3 months here recently. The end rooms, as Sean was saying, are negative airflow, but all of the sidewall are positive airflow. Each of them has an air exchange. On the end is 4 minutes, on the sidewall 7. So when we had all this flu stuff going on, the inpatient was a grinding halt because they were saying that they had to, the EVS guys had to sit on the room or block the room for a length of time, like an hour and a half, for the airflow to turn over before they could even go in and clean the room. And we're like, not here. As soon as you get your card here, air's clean. Get in there. So,
Yeah, one exchange, and it's 68% clean already. Yes?
How have your operational metrics been impacted by having more space? Is your throughput time longer now?
well, that's a great question. You guys heard if they build it, they will come. Well, if you don't build it, they will come. And if you build it, they will come faster. And due to the process changes, it doesn't matter how much planning and preparing we did, and my team back here, about a third of the nurses said, to hell with it, I'm out of here. And so we then spent a year and a half getting back up to staff. And we've just accomplished that last August, yeah. I'd say August, where we're just fully staffed, almost no overtime. And since that time, we've also made a couple additions since then. We've really finally perfected what I would say matching our staffing and nursing staffing and physician staffing patterns with our arrival times. And so our door-to-doc time is now, we cut it from the first year was 97 minutes, and we're down to under 35, so consistently. With that, we've seen our LBS cut. Jim commented on it in an email last week that our LBS went from 5.5% to we're running right at 1.5 consistently now. And our customer service scores, as you guys all know, go right up with that because they go hand in hand. Nobody pays to wait.
Yeah, and Just one last thing on the patient flow. I see I cut you off, Jim. On the patient flow that Sherry talked about earlier, it was funny back there. He and his guys were asking the patient flow. What's that? We called it. They came up with this when we were doing this, but we have a comms nurse centralized right there behind in the green pod, and she is responsible for placing every single patient, no matter how they come in, ambulance, transfer, whatever it is, and that really also adds to the efficiencies of the facility, is being able to know where and how and when at all times.
I'm just going to add, from doing lots and lots of construction projects, it's a rare leader that can lead through a redesign project and survive into the new ED. So you got to write down a lot of the stuff that you were doing and thinking of. Second is, if you leap over one of those 20,000 volume increments, you really change your process altogether, and you do lose a lot of staff. And it's best to implement your IT changes before you move into the new emergency department.
Oh yeah,
We did that.
One success factor.
We did that about 8 months prior to going in. We went from paper to electronic.
yeah.
So I had double whammy for staff satisfaction.
Yeah, and across the board as much as you can. I mean, they tried to ramp up for staffing. They got the IT working on board. I mean, the mock-ups, the physical mock-ups were built a year before the thing was being built, so that there was no question about what needed to be in each one of the individual spaces. Those are all extremely key that unfortunately a lot of people, until they have lived it, they don't realize how early you have to start with that process. Yes.
Just wondering how your soundproofing and noise level.
Great question. Once again, I forget.
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry. The question was soundproofing, noise level. So just like with many of the things that we heard today, we have white noise, or actually pink noise, throughout the entire thing. It knocks down probably 30% of everything you would have, masks it. In addition to that, like was referenced earlier, they're called NTC panels. And so instead of the typical acoustical ceiling tiles, they have a foil backing to them of fiberglass, and they reduce sound absorption, or they increase sound absorption as well. So, and the masking systems, I mean, that's a no-brainer. You guys should do that no matter what facility you're in, new or old or how. It's really cost-effective way. Get in there. You can implement that tomorrow.
And doors on every room instead of curtains.
That's true. Absolutely, yeah. And the sliding glass doors, I think that's. We haven't done an emergency department in the last 7 years that didn't have sliding glass doors. We just take it for granted because I see other, projects that just have 4.0 doors, and you don't realize what a difference it makes.
Operationally, this tells it all. You guys all deal with the almighty grievances, right? We waste a bunch of our time on this stuff. Our complaints were always, well, I overheard people, whatever. And in this ED, our complaints are, well, I waited in the waiting room for an hour and you guys aren't even busy, when every room is full. The place looks dead and it's quiet. It's really low key. It's pretty amazing. Any of you guys are welcome to come see it. God knows I give enough tours. Thanks to him.
There's too much.
Any music or television or anything in there?
Every room has TV.
Yeah.
As far as process improvement and metrics, do you take individually, or do you do it by pod, or?
That's a great question, but no, we don't. Sorry. Do we measure our throughput metrics by pod? No, we do it overall by hour of the day. And so we shift our resources based on when we're seeing changes in our arrival patterns. So we're just now, literally, our medical director and I were discussing, as I'm kicking them in the butt, we've got to have a doc extend their shift from an 8 to a 9-hour shift. I need somebody coming in an hour earlier every day, just based on that jump in arrivals. But we're going to wait a couple months. A couple of changes we recently made is let me back up. When we opened this thing, we thought that based on volume and room space turns per day, we thought, you know what, we're going to live in 3 pods for about 2 or 3 years. We opened the 4th pod within 6 months. We opened the 5th pod this last October 26th. February 1st, we added a mid-level. So our volumes are going up, but as we're doing it, we just want to do it right. We want people, they don't come in, let's face it, they don't come in to see the registrar or the triage nurse. They come to see you guys. So they come in, we got a chief complaint, quick reg. We have a transporter, not a nurse, not an ER tech even, a $9 an hour transporter, scoop in a wheelchair and take them to a room. And we keep the cycle going. So our metrics, we don't do by pod, that's something we could look at. However, our staff rotate considerably. We use that 5th pod, the one we just opened, it's just 8 hours a day right now. peak 8. And we try to keep the acuities around 3 in that room, not the super sick stuff, so that they can turn a little better. And then the mid-level, the single mid-level, we have a real low volume of low acuity patients, and we admit 33% of our patients that arrive. Now, one thing that kind of skews the whole numbers is we have an urgent care on campus on the opposite end that sees 42,000. So,
Yeah. Their 4s and 5s are minimal compared to most facilities.
but there's enough to keep one mid-level provider busy still.
Yeah.
How do you handle the open and closing of pods? They set rules of time.
Yes. That's,
Very good.
we can shut down early, but it's obviously hard to open early because you're getting the staff to come in because they know they're on set arrival patterns throughout the course of the day. So, at 2 of them around the clock, 2 more 16 hours a day, and then the 1 is 8. And I'm wanting to make that 16 a 17 and extend it earlier. But we're pretty fluid in it and addressing it. And our staff, thank God, are very receptive to Crystal back there, that when she says, okay, I need you to change your shift, you were 11, now I need you to be a 1-to-1. And you always get volunteers that want to do it. So.
I would suspect this is a challenge, and this would actually be a challenge to anybody that's in on anything other than a 20,000 visit tiny little ER. The care and feeding of the pods, I would call it. So you'll always hear complaints, right? If you're in well, those guys in the blue zone, the blue bullpen, they're not pulling their share. So do you have a strategy for where does the next patient go?
That's a great question. And even though we do it very well consistently, Sean, back up to the one with the arrows, pointing the directional flow.
Gotcha.
But what we do is we tell them to shut up, put on your big boy pants, quit worrying about each other, because docs and nurses are equally guilty all day, every day of that complaint.
Oh, yeah.
But that comms nurse, as Sean alluded to a little bit ago, they control all flow inbound, no matter where it comes from.
Yep.
Transfers, EMS, walk-ins, they assign patients, and they do it rotationally. So you're getting the next one, you're getting the next one. Well, if you notice the ambulance entrance there, we're not 100% successful due to this rotational pattern, but we try to keep the ambulance patients in those 2 blue pods. It's geographically closer. We try to keep the walk-ins in the amber or the green pods. It's geographically closer. It makes more sense. So, but we rigidly stick to the rotational pattern.
Okay. 2 things that I want you to know.
And that I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to point one. That put pressure on those docs that weren't holding their own.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to keep up with the pace of your partners from this model.
So I know someone at RAND who's working on a model that can calculate the workload, and it's a combination not just of ESI when they get there, but orders that need to be done, imaging that needs to be done, results that are back that need to be processed and so forth. It's a very complicated model that will predict who has the lightest workload when you've got multiple zones or pods, and so who should get the next hit. So that's one novel idea. And another one that I saw that was homegrown at a hospital, where the docs could enter into the tracking system if they couldn't, because it's Las Vegas, I'm going to put it this way, they couldn't take another hit. Blackjack, hit me, don't hit me. So they were allowed under certain circumstances to say, I can't take anybody for a while, like they're doing resuscitation, or they've got a stroke or something. And then they're supposed to push it back when, Judy, I'm going to take us off divert. It was like a pod diversion, if you will, when you're on overdrive. And so I liked both of those ideas, that we could somehow be a little bit more objective and a little more real time at who gets the next patient, because I'm sure you get grumbling about that.
They all, trust me, have the comms phone on speed dial, so they can call nurses or physicians, say, hey, you know what, skip me this round.
Yeah.
They don't very often, because some of them want to do that when they don't need skipped, and they don't know what's going on in the other pod. They think they do, but they don't. There's only 7 patients over there. I've got 10, yeah, but 3 of those are getting on vents right now. Right. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
So we try to police that. Another thing that we actually use to help offset variations in the acuity of each pod is that amber east one. It's one of the ones that stays open 24/7. It's the 15-bed one there in the middle. There's a second dock in that one that takes 6 rooms there and 3 in the green, typically. Well, that person also floats to any other pod that needs help. If there's just a patient that they are just too overwhelmed with, they can go over there and help them out.
sorry, I'll just repeat it, the concept of load leveling, you should be thinking about as you expand into different geographic zones or pods.
That's also why initially, Sean is correct, initially that green pod was going to be kind of the fast track stuff. Well, we decided real quick that is not an equal load. So we use every pod, we try to spread the wealth. So you can everything from death and dying to, you know, sprained ankles in any pod.
Yeah, which you have the capacity to handle.
I was going to ask, who staffs your ops? Is it mid-levels?
Hospitalists.
Yes. Yeah, the original concept was that the ED would take care of it, but then once everybody started looking at how do we get compensated, physician-wise, who controls it, how do I take care of that guy that's that far away, that's not fair, it all defaulted back to the hospitalist.
And they love it, to be quite honest. They leave hospitalists there 24/7.
Oh yeah, hospitalists are good. It's just the whole hospital uses that thing too.
Last question.
How far did you say your urgent care is from the actual ED?
600 yards.
Do you ever have situations where patients that show up in urgent care that need to be in the ER and how do they?
About 10 a day.
Repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Patients showing up in the urgent care that need emergency care. About 10 times a day, they either bring them down or we have a few that we've ambulanced over. So,
Yep.
Thank you,
Yep.
both.
FPs.
Sean?
Thank you very much.